Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Badger Lodge call-in show, where once a month, if we can, we have you guys call in and give us your takes on whatever you want. I usually pick a subject to discuss, or at least give my thoughts on. You don't have to respond to what I'm talking about. Just say whatever you want to say. Trying things a little different. I repositioned the camera so that I'm looking right at it instead of it being off to the side. I don't know if this is better or weirder. I feel like I'm talking to Hal and the FBI and the CIA, but here we are. So yeah, welcome to the show again. Before we get started, please hit like while this stream is live, so that hopefully we can reach some more people, get activated in their algorithms. And participate in the chat. And if you have something you want to bring up, you could just maybe make us aware of something that we didn't know. You can just call in to say thank you, or give us a compliment. You can call in and fight with us if you disagree on something, if we've done something wrong. I know that I have been someone that people have taken issue with things that I've said, and I invite anybody to come on and talk to me about it. Give me your 2 cents. It's fine. I'm expecting a guest that's going to be on the show with me. I brought him on for Badger Lodges before. His name is David Okorodudu, and I believe that he is in the screening room right now. Swashberry, you do let me know if he is. I'd appreciate that, and I'll bring him in here. He wanted to talk a little bit about male loneliness, because that's been among a lot of other issues that have been discussed on the wider internet space. We already went and responded to a Shoe on Head video about it, and I've also seen other people who don't normally talk about men's rights content or men's issues at all, or are not part of the manosphere, discussing it. So it is a bigger and more pervasive, I guess, discussion that's happening, which is good. But I also want to talk about Pearl and some of the stuff that she's been doing, and a little bit of news for you guys. Allison has been contacted by Pearl's producer and is going to try to get her on her channel to talk to her and help spread awareness about our existence. So here's hoping that I think it's going to be great. I mean, Pearl has already talked to Paul Elam twice. She talked to Janice Fiamengo, and she's talked to Karen. So I won't get into the Pearl thing this second, but all I will say is that she is reaching out to people unlike other parts of the manosphere. So, and I'm talking about reaching out to good people. Anyway, let me see if this person in the screening room is the guy, and I'm going to bring him in here. So let me know what you think. Are you excited about Allison going on Pearl's show? I'm hoping that Pearl will come on ours, but I don't know if she likes to work that way, because I've asked Karen to talk to her. I've asked Mike Buchanan to talk to her. It's another person that Pearl has interviewed, is Mike Buchanan. I think that it's sort of an inevitability. She's inevitably going to end up on this channel at some point. So hopefully sooner rather than later. But anyway, before I get into Pearl, let me bring David in here. So hello, David.
Hello, Brian. How goes it?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
I'm alive. I'm kicking, and I'm doing my best.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. So I know that I hadn't talked to you in a while. So, but everybody, this is David Okoro. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Okorodudu? Or
yes.
Do you? Okay. And you
Apologies to the audience.
Oh no, it's all right. It's all right. We can just call you David A. So, you still live in Canada?
Yes, unfortunately so. At the moment, at least, I intend to finish my education, which is I have between 6 to 4 courses left. Yeah. So give or take by sometime early next year, be it in February or March, I should be thoroughly done with that. When I'm done with that education, and at the moment, I'm taking essentially a Google IT certification course.
Oh, okay! Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
I think working for the bad guys.
well, the most of it is just rudimentary IT tech support skills. The idea essentially is to get people with reasonable skills out into the job market. I would think anyway. I mean, of course, the province is worried about that because they've effectively locked a huge portion of the male population out of the workforce here in
Yeah.
Manitoba,
Yeah.
and they're going to regret it. They're going to regret exactly what they've done because idle hands, man, idle hands,
Oh, I
and
know. I know.
yeah. But they're going to learn that lesson the hard way. Anyway, um, I guess the whole point is, as soon as I'm done with the certification course, I would be at least competent enough with a certification to start an IT career, particularly as a tech support specialist. So it's a very helpful set of skills to have if you have essentially a HR degree as well,
Yeah.
to have those two certifications. And I'm taking both of them at the same time. I mean, of course, a lot of my frustration comes from the fact that I wish I had been able to do this before I turned 30, particularly because like Brian, I did everything I could to get work, man. In my 20s, I went to every door I could knock on, and there were no positive answers. And so I guess the more you do it over time, the more demoralizing it is. So I'm just happy that I have these opportunities available to me. As soon as they're done, I intend to go look for. I intend to see if there's any company in the states that will be willing to sponsor me immigration wise, so I can come work for them. So I'll be looking for that as well. Plus, I intend to kick my YouTube channel into full gear. If all I can do is talk into a microphone going forward, then yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So pretty much.
All right. Well, I want to throw something out there, and you tell me what you think about it. So, I've been talking to my wife about us starting our own content, and I have some things that I want to do on my own. But the only issue, I know how to do editing, and I know what I like to talk about. I have like a grasp on several subjects. I've made a list, but I'm not a great writer of scripts. And I think that you seem pretty like eloquent and well read, so maybe you would be able to help me out with that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I'm still trying to get used to this whole push to talk thing where you actually have to
Oh,
push the
yeah,
button
yeah, okay.
before you talk. So I'm just
Yeah.
like screaming into a void
Oh,
without that active.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, look, I would be, I'd be delighted to do that if it
Hmm.
lets me work, if it provides me with a means to do what I always wanted to do, which is start a commentary channel. I recently tried to get uh, essentially a $40,000 venture capital
Hmm.
fund for
Hmm.
starting up my own YouTube channel. The organization in this case, of course, essentially took the view because they have to answer to the government of Manitoba. The government of Manitoba took the view, in effect, that how do I put it, that YouTube ventures are fairly high risk ventures,
Hmm.
or at least they see it as non tangible, so to speak. Like folks who view YouTube content creators as not having a real job.
Yes.
Well, you wouldn't have to worry about whether or not they had a real job if you would simply kindly open up the workforce to these boys. Like,
Hmm.
we're in a situation here in Manitoba, and I don't want to belabor this point, but I just want to give people context as to why any of this is happening in the first place. I'm a fairly good writer, and I have a lot of skills at my disposal. However, I did want to work. I did want in my early to mid, even to late 20s, to find a job where I would be able to pour essentially my energy and my effort into. and just get some skills whilst at the same time keeping my lights on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was the plan. It wasn't a kind of, like a get rich quick scheme. No, it was go there and get an entry level job and do well at it and do well enough at it that, your boss doesn't have a bad word to say about you after give or take 2-3 years of service. Right. So, normally speaking, that would be the kind of attitude you'd want someone looking for an entry level position to have. The problem I found that I met was that not only the threshold for employment with entry level work in Manitoba, I'm not sure how it is in the rest of Canada, but here you need, in some cases, a year's worth of prior experience before you get work. You need up to 5 years in some cases for an entry level job, and it's one of those things where if you can't get experience, you can't work. But how do you get experience? You have to work.
Exactly.
So it's essentially a vicious cycle. And what they've done, what the folks in charge of crafting Canadian employment law have done, I would argue, and for some people, it's there's a tendency not to view this maliciously. Believe that essentially the job market is operating this way because of globalization, but and several other factors, including just the number of people coming in, the competition for jobs, and so on, all of which are valid points. You understand?
Yes.
But one of the issues here that makes me consider that there's a social engineering component to this is that I've read Canadian employment law, particularly Manitoba Employment Standards Law, and not just that, but Canadian human rights law. And it is a very draconian document. It essentially legalizes state discrimination. And
Yeah.
what it does, in effect, so there are a group called protected categories. And if you're not part of a protected category, the likelihood that you will get a job or that you will be considered for a job diminishes. I know people in this province who are fairly hardworking gentlemen, but because they said, their boss said they didn't want a white male in a certain position, so they had to, they essentially had to leave. They had to go find something else to do. And so that's the situation we find ourselves in, where the job market is being engineered for the purpose of enforcing what are effectively Marxist dictates on an entire population.
Yeah.
In this case, being men. And there's the idea, well, what are you a white man? Are you a minority man? I think, of course, white males are despised, but in almost any category, be it a disabled person, a visible minority, person with disability, and so on, the primary characteristic, the category that you have to take to be considered first in line for that, even in a crowded job market, is you have to be a woman.
Yep.
So if you have a disability, you have to be a woman with a disability.
Yep.
So that's the current state of things, and I don't mean to sort of belabor the point. That's what I'm here, and that's why it's been so hard. So,
no, you're right, 100%. We've talked about it on the show. Intersectionality is just excluding men with more stuff, but it starts with excluding men from things. It's not even about inclusion; it's about exclusion. But and I'm sorry you're going through that. It's definitely happening everywhere. I think that, and I don't say this as a boast. I say this as a way of looking at just how sort of like bad our situation is. The best place for you to go is probably still the United States, but that is under attack as well. It's not like this is what it was. But I agree, and I hope that you can get it, because Canada's it's a mess. Like, it is a mess, and I don't know if people are just so. And I'll say the same thing for the States and for the UK and stuff, because I see this everywhere. I think people are just not informed. They're demoralized. They think that they're doing whatever is in they're only acting in their own interest and not in the interest of their community or their people or their country or whatever. And so I don't know if it's going to change, but I'm glad that you're still kicking and doing your best, and I would like to. I want to get into the main subject, but If anybody else has any sort of similar experiences, let us know in the chat and maybe leave a comment about it. But I think that there is some I guess I'm unfortunately I'm just a super optimistic person that's always looking on the bright side or looking towards like the possible. And I think that there is definitely a lot that's changing. For example, I meet a lot of people here in Roanoke, and when they ask me what I do, I tell them, and I expect that they're gonna, shun me, or I'm not gonna hear from them again. But then I'll see them, and they'll say, I looked at your stuff, and I like it, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Now, granted, I'm not in Chicago, where I probably would get lynched for sharing my opinions, but here in Roanoke, which is a smaller city, it seems like there's a lot more open-mindedness, and so I don't. Maybe there are a lot of people that are really frustrated, that are really upset with the way things are going, especially men. And you're right about the idle hands thing. This is something that I have talked about on the show, that when men have nothing to do because they've been pushed out of everything, then you're going to get some men that are going to react in a destructive way, most of the time just to themselves, but sometimes to others around them. And of course, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on. Just finish your thought.
I was just gonna finish my thought. Is that like sometimes they'll lash out in some way and it'll hurt other people, but usually it might be just themselves. But what I was gonna say is I think this is what these people want, because if men do act that way, then they get to use that, right? It becomes it's what Hegel described as a dialectic. Like, you create a system of people like antagonizing another group, in this case men. Eventually some of those men react, and then they get to double down, and then they get another reaction, because that's what they're trying to do. But it can't really, I'm not saying that there's nothing that can be done, but I'm saying that we're in a stage now where that's kind of inevitable. But what we're hoping to do with this channel and is to like help men with like giving them useful tools to know what's going on and not take the bait, as it were. And I think that that's also working, because a lot of men are checking out. There's marriage statistics and stuff are really in the toilet. And it might seem strange that, what does employment have to do with marriage? But the truth is that men can live on very little, and the only reason why they pursue anything else is to support a family. I don't care if you're trad or not. That doesn't matter. That's the facts. That's just reality. Men get married most of the time. That's what they want. And if it doesn't look like it's worth it, then more and more of them are checking out. So, and that was mainly, what I wanted to say. So, I think that, well, that's all I wanted to say. So I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
Well, certainly. You're 100% correct in your analysis of it. There's I just like to add a few things. First, in regards to the idle hands portion of this, being that if you have a large population of disillusioned men, not all of them are going to be civil in their disillusionment. And this used to be something that the statesmen of old, our grandfathers who are now deceased and passed away, who built our respective societies, understood. And when women say things like society was built to benefit men at the expense of everybody else, I look at them and I laugh, because that is clearly an example of someone who's not just dislocated from reality, but someone who has an axe to grind and who essentially is dislocated from their own country. I've said this time and time again that women, particularly women in the West, especially women in the West, in most cases, probably just them in certain cases, they operate in society not as fellow citizens, but as a distinct socio-political faction with their own goals.
Yeah, they're like the aristocracy.
Well, of course, they are like the aristocracy, but it's a kind of how do I put it? A kind of authoritarian nobility where they behave like commissars. Like the average, you might say the average woman on the street who's been told by maybe Steinem or Betty Friedan or Jermaine Gray or any of these people. The average woman who's been told that, you're a boss babe, get that bag, and these men ain't shit, screw these men, you can do it all on your own, and these men are your enemies, and whatever you can do to undercut them, do it anyway.
Yep.
Those women are foot soldiers, essentially being used and essentially being conned in some cases, being manipulated in a game of chance. And it's one of the things where when the truth finally comes out, it'll be too late for a lot of these ladies. There's nothing as sad as watching a feminist die of a terminal illness. Being sat next to her deathbed, and I've had the misfortune of having to do that in my life. And when you see it, you can't unsee it, because then not all this ideology, it doesn't matter, man. All that matters then is just you facing death and your doubts that you have.
I agree.
And you hear the person talking about things like, have I really lived a good life? Did I make the best possible decisions? So again, these are the things that matter. And to these ladies who are carrying out these ideological orders on behalf of essentially a group of people who they've wedded themselves and their loyalty to, on behalf of these adversarial interests to both our society and to everything the West, the civilized world, stands for. To them, I say, you will get exactly what you bargained for, and you won't like it. Now, in regards specifically to the idle hands comment that I made, look, there's an old African proverb that goes something like this: if a village does not embrace its sons, then the sons will return to burn down the village to feel its warmth. If you don't give your sons a purpose, if you don't give them love and empathy, then your enemies will give them Kalashnikovs. And this is where our society is sort of headed to. It's like, I really don't think the powers that be understand the amount of grievance they're piling up. Like, I don't think they get it, but maybe someday soon they will understand. Someday soon.
Yes, the suffering has to happen first, but that's the only way, I think. Like, I think that too many women are too far gone to realize what they have contributed to, and until they start suffering and everyone starts suffering, people are going to course correct. I don't think they will before then, but that's okay, because I'm going to be ready, and I'm hoping that you all will be ready, and that's kind of all we can do now. It's like Allison says, we're building an arc. I like to think of it like, hey, this way you're not going to be blindsided when all this happens. But I do think that other people are taking notice, and I wanted to, that's what brings me to the main, well, not main, but like the thing I wanted to talk about. David, you can stick around for this if you wish. Anybody who wants to call in, the link to the Discord is in the description. If it isn't working, because I know that these things time out, but I don't know how long it is before they stop being good links. Let me know in the chat. Tag at Badger Livestreams in the live chat so I see it. But it should work. I don't know how long you've been waiting in the screening room, David, but I put that link out like in the afternoon when I set up the show. So it should be good. So go there, fight with me if you want to, call me names, or say thank you, or tell me about something that maybe you're not from the United States or Canada and you want to share a bit of info about how how things are going in your respective country. Please let me know. I love hearing from people from far off lands. So okay, so this brings me to Pearl Davis. And I look at it like this, okay? Once upon a time, there were two female men's advocates or dating coaches or people who commented on the dynamics between the sexes. Two. One was Chloe Roma. The other one was Pearl Davis. They came out around the same time, or at least that's when I became aware of them. And A lot of people were, that were already a part of this discussion, like me and the Badgers and others, were really curious about, like, are these people real, or are they just, using this to get to grow a channel and become popular and essentially like make money? And from the beginning, and I'm just sort of saying what my gut told me, okay, I watched a couple of videos from both of these ladies, and what my gut told me was that Chloe Roma has good intentions, but there are lines that she's not willing to cross based on her own political ideologies. Pearl was kind of going without restraints. She would go on the street. She would bring guests. She would talk to people. Chloe Roma does not. She generally talks into the mirror, and with a lot of her older videos, or she'll get a guest on that already agrees with her. So I figured Pearl seems like a real one. And for a while, I was still kind of like skeptical, and I knew other guys, because I'm part of the XY crew, which is this group that Paul Elam runs, which is men talking to men, about their lives, about their goals, about their issues or whatever. It's very productive. It's a space where men can just be themselves in the company of other men. It's one of the few refuges on Earth that women are not overseeing or getting involved in. And so I go to the XY crew every Thursday, and sometimes Pearl comes up in conversation. I remember we talked about the passing of Kevin Samuels, R.I.P. to the King, and Pearl because she was a fan of his, so she kind of like, picked up the torch or decided she was going to carry on talking about the same kind of things. And then Pearl had Paul Elam, Janice Fiumango, and Mike Buchanan on her show. And when she did that, I said, okay, this is good, because Chloe Roma, I reached out to her multiple times, and I said, would you like to come on Honey Badger Radio? We've been doing this for 10 years. It could be good for us to talk to each other. You have a large audience. Never heard from her. For whatever reason, right? And one of her friends, this guy named Tin Men, I had him on my show, and we talked, but I wasn't getting a lot of depth out of it. And in the after show, we ended up disagreeing on some stuff that I thought was pretty fundamental, because he was bringing intersectionality into men's issues. And David and I just talked about how intersectionality is useless. It's useless. It doesn't work for men. It's not really good for anybody, honestly. And so I was like, well, I mean, good luck to you, but this isn't really what I'm looking for. I don't think this is going to help. And so here comes Pearl, and she interviews good people that have been doing this a long time. And I think she's going to be doing more, because, as I told you, she's talked to Karen, she's talked to Paul Elam, she's talked to Mike Buchanan, she talked to Janice Fiumango. And she talked to Paul Elam again. She talked to him twice. And I talked to Paul Elam because he lives here. And so, we did lunch a couple weeks ago, and he told me about his interview with Pearl, and that he liked her because he thought she seemed genuine. Now, a lot of people have thoughts, and they want to call her a grifter and all these other things, but the truth is, I don't really care. I don't care what her intentions are. I don't care about her romantic history. I don't care about whatever it is, because at the end of the day, she is very popular. She's getting on the right guests. She's talking to them. I think she's going to be talking to Cassie J soon. She may have already talked to Cassie J, I think. And she's going to be getting on Allison, because Allison told me today that she heard from Pearl's agent, and that Allison's going to be making an appearance, and inevitably that means that either she's going to come on our channel, or maybe more of us will go over there. I don't know. So I think that's a good thing. And here's what I think is really great. Okay, Pearl's been going after the Daily Wire. and I think this is fantastic, because the thing is, okay, I know that people get mad at me because I don't throw the tradcons under the bus to the same extent that I do the left. But my reasoning has always been consistent, which is the left is not worth reaching out to. They hate men, full stop. They hate men as a class. They are not going to help them. And if they do, it's either lip service so they can gain virtue points, because the only thing they like is to feel like they're better than everybody else. They don't actually want to solve problems. or they want to give them help in a feminist framework. This is the thing that Nick Redding told us about, which I never disagreed with him on, but I had a job to do, which is, like if we're working with Cafe, we're kind of working with feminists because Cafe works with feminists, and there you have to have a line, because if you have to be very, very, very vigilant in making sure that they don't cram any of that toxic masculinity APA guidelines bullshit into helping men, because all it's going to do is help them to an early grave. And considering how open Canada is to making sure people go to the grave earlier than maybe like God intended, it would seem to me that these are compounding factors that are worth noting. So the left is not our friends; they're our enemies. Period. Like, there's no working with those people. But on the conservative side, I've always said that at least they will listen. And one of the things I said to Paul is that most MRAs were trad, and I don't mean like conservative, but they wanted a traditional marriage and family. Most of them do before they find out about how the system is rigged. And when they find out, that's when they become men's rights activists. You've either had your heart broken, or you've been the victim of a false allegation, or you got married and you had a terrible divorce, or you lost access to your kids, or someone claimed that you were the father of their child and they ruined your life, whatever it is. But before any of those things happened, you were probably thinking as a man, that as a heterosexual man, oh, I'm going to find someone, I'm going to fall in love, and we're going to start a family, and it's going to be great, right? This is what most men are looking at. And maybe you were never that way. Maybe you were a gay man and you were not interested in women, but you still might have had an experience. Maybe you lost a job because they wanted to give it to a woman. Maybe you didn't get access to a grant or a scholarship because they wanted to give it to a woman. Maybe you were the victim of this kind of reverse discrimination that occurs in the job market, in housing, in car insurance, in basically everything, okay? So I think that because of that, there is a space for us to make a case, like to make the case. And most of the time, conservatives are willing to listen. And I've had conservatives on, and I have made my case to them, and sometimes they're receptive, and sometimes they're not initially, but later on they do change. And I'm going to be working on a video to explain a very, very good case example. I'm going to be making one for another channel that I'm working on with Lindsay, which I already sort of like teased you guys about, which is going to be following a timeline so you can see what I'm talking about. So anyway, Pearl has made a couple of videos about Daily Wire folks, because she's been making posts. What she does is she's very, very, how do I put it? She makes really like posts that are meant to upset people, but also get them to think. She's like, she's provocative, and she'll say things like, it's not worth it for men to get married right now, or men should get vasectomies, which I talked about in the last call-in show. But she's doing this on purpose. She's trying to like say, look, these are not, completely unviable opinions for men to have about marriage, about reproduction, about, allegations. I mean, did you hear about the pitcher that was accused of like all kinds of crazy stuff because the woman wanted to get his money? Did you know about that?
Well, I've heard about it, but I'm not familiar with the pitcher's name.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's Carlson or something, but I'm going to be covering it on Tuesday. But this stuff happens all the time. I mean, whenever a man steps out of line, like Lawrence Fox, like Russell Brand, then the allegations come out and they use it to destroy him. So this is not even something that's like, you could be the most together dude. Like, you could work very hard, you could like avoid women altogether, you could be very careful about how you interact with folks and everything, but if you are on the wrong side of whatever, then they will use women's victimhood as a weapon to destroy you. It doesn't matter what you've done, it doesn't matter that you have done something or have not. And this is something that I've been talking about this, I've been bleeding this out for years and years. So anyway, I'm going to go back to Pearl's thing. So she's provocative online, and she has been bugging the Daily Wire lately. And I'm going to play a little bit of this. I'm going to share this with David so you can see it too. So let me just share my video screen with you. And this is Pearl talking about Andrew Klavan and his thoughts on this whole marriage thing. So I'm going to play this. Pearl, please don't copyright strike me. I'm promoting you. I'm not attacking you. Okay, let's hear it.
So Andrew Klavan, another social commentator for the Daily Wire, also weighed in. Now, I wanted to point something out that Andrew is 69 years old, so he is in the older guy category that I was talking about. Now, let's see what he has to say.
So there's a big debate that the Daily Wire is involved in a big way. This provocateur, Hannah Pearl Davis, she's sometimes called the female Andrew Tate because she's kind of down on women. She disses women a lot. And she's been pointing out that feminists in the courts have ruined marriage and guys shouldn't get married. And Ben and Walsh and even Jeremy have all weighed in opposing her. And she works the way provocateurs work. They all make these extreme statements. Andrew Tate does this too. Nick Fuentes does it. And when they're attacked, when people say that's a really horrible thing to say,
it's kind of shitty that he compares Pearl to Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes, just for the record. Especially comparing him to Nick Fuentes, considering what Klavan thinks of Fuentes. I don't watch enough of Fuentes' content to have an opinion on it. I don't care. I think everybody has a right to say whatever. I don't give a shit. But I think it's kind of fucked up. Now, generally, I like Klavan because he's an artist. And I'm an artist. And when he talks about art, I become interested. When he talks about the importance of culture, I like that stuff. And a lot of things he's right, but when it comes to men and women, he does not know what it's like out here. He has no idea. He thinks, oh, just find a good woman that prays and you'll be fine. It's like, no, I'm sorry, but that's just not the case. Anyway, Dave, do you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say that I really don't think it's necessarily the case that that he's incidentally closed-minded to men's issues. I think it's the case that he's a product of his upbringing. He's part of a generation of men who were raised essentially to venerate the role that women have in society, the role of mothers as a key component of a community, to understand the value that women, generally speaking, on their best behavior, provides to a community. The issue here that Andrew is not observing, the issue that Andrew isn't paying enough attention to, because I think he takes the view, in essence, that men have a proprietary responsibility to society, and that if anything goes wrong, then it is indicative of their failure and their folly and their refusal, so to speak, to be active participants in society and set it right. I think the reason he takes such a rough stance against men without even seeing the other side is that he's a man of a different time, and it's also that he what's the word I'm looking for? He doesn't understand that these are not the ladies of his wife's generation. Yeah, he fails to realize that his wife's generation and his mother's generation were asleep at the wheel. Right. And they raised the generation of women who essentially do not in any way, shape, or form identify with the positive vision of their society.
Yeah. Well, yes, I agree. But his life's not over yet. How many awful encounters or experiences do you have to have with a woman before you start, questioning what you have always been conditioned to believe? And I think that in most cases it's just one. So if his wife divorces him in the next 5 years, he's suddenly going to realize what we've been talking about. It's just that he hasn't had that experience yet. I think that's maybe not. Maybe he'll be too stubborn. But I think that it is the case that if like I said, if you haven't experienced it, you're gonna have like a trad kind of approach to things, approach to women. Like, well, or maybe you don't know anyone who's experienced it, or maybe you do, but you think it's somehow the man's fault, which Clavin does go into. Like, he knows this guy who, like, he's been divorced like 3 times or broke up 3 times or something, and he said that all the women were the same kind of woman, and so it's the man's fault. And there might be some truth to that, because you should learn, to be able to discern women, but at the same time, you also have to be like, well, why are so many women fucking crazy? Like, why, but let's hear some more of this.
They explain their extreme statements away, and their followers pretend to believe the explanation while they really believe the extreme statements. So they say, women are stupid, and you say, well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. And then they say, well, what I meant by that is they don't always make the right decisions. And everybody says, see, he doesn't really mean that. But what they really think is that women are stupid. So Pearl has been complaining. She complained on Twitter that only young guys like marriage, and she called out Ben and Walsh and I think Jeremy. And somebody said, well, what about Clavin? And so I answered, I've been blissfully married for 43 years. My wife, of course, has been trying to escape, but I won't let her because it's been bliss for me. But I'm very cognizant that this is a special blessing in my life. I have a wonderful wife, truly. She gave me a home. She mothered our children. She nurtured my career. She believed in me when I had nothing. And she's the absolute love of my life. And that's not something I'm just saying. Truly, if I had the time that I have spent making love to that woman, if I had used it more productively, I would be an astrophysicist today, which I don't want to be, so it's actually fine. So, but not everyone gets to marry that kind of wife, and no one else can get the best wife because I've got her. So I kind of am a little bit hesitant to say, oh yes, get married because it's a great thing. Now, Pearl's point, which I think she has a point when she gets to the explanation part, when she stopped provoking you. Some of the stuff she says has a point. She says that feminists have ruined marriage. She says a lot of marriages fail. She's put the number at like 50%, but it's been falling steadily. It's now around 40%. And for certain cohorts, it's much lower than that. But she points out that in divorce, men get killed by the courts and by divorce laws. Here's cut 7.
Many of these guys get so stressed out, they lose their jobs because or they have astronomical court fees, child support, all that shit. And a lot of guys will spend, the average guy makes what, 50K a year? Guys will spend 150K in court fees just to not get their kids. And the thing is, you can take money from a guy, but there is something about a man who is so desperate to see his child. Like, it is the saddest thing you have ever seen, where his child will be a mile from him and he hasn't seen him in 2 years.
So her point is that if 40% of marriages fail and then it's this misery because the courts destroy you, why would you even take that chance? Now, I myself have pointed out something else long before there was a Pearl Davis. Those little T-shirts that they have that says game over, and they'll have a cartoon and they'll show a happy bride and a frowning groom. And the point is that marriage is for women, not men. And when men are caught, these are a lot of old 40s songs are about this. Love is the tender trap, and making whoopee. You want to make whoopee, but you wind up washing dishes and baby clothes. And there's no reason not to take that complaint seriously. It wouldn't be a meme if it weren't an actual serious thing. Our form of marriage was invented by the Catholic Church to protect women. Feminists who say, oh, it was slavery, no, it was to protect women. And a man sacrifices his deep urge for freedom and sexual variety and sexual adventure and other kinds of adventure, so a woman can indulge her deep urge to have children in a protected and supported environment, with him supporting her and making sure she is all right. In return for that sacrifice, in the old days, each man received a little kingdom. I received a little kingdom when I got married. I got a family. I was the head of that family. I got respect. I got support for my professional work. And I was surrounded by a home which I would never have had. I would always been a drifter if I hadn't fallen in love with the right woman. Pearl is right about this, that feminism has destroyed marriage in the sense that men are expected to sacrifice a freedom that is deeply important to them, not just sexual freedom, but it's the freedom to not know what they're going to be doing next or who they're going to be, and not to be responsible to anybody. And they get absolutely nothing in return. And here is the whole thing about talking about marriage. If we're not going to be honest about it, then, and it's worthwhile, we can't save it. Because one of the other things I didn't think when I left my wife is, marrying this woman would be good for society, so I'm going to do that. I didn't think that at all. I didn't even think it would be good for me. I thought it was something I wanted to do. But because no one can say the words the conservatives are right, but no one can say the words that male-female marriage is the pinnacle of human relationship, that is basically what we've got going for us, the center of our society, we have to live in lies. And what happens when you live in lies is there are these invisible brick walls, and you keep bumping into.
All right, I'm going to pause it for a moment here. I know he goes on and on. So there is something that's left out of this. This whole thing that he's not addressing is that the problem is not that men don't want to get married because they don't want to, because they want to be sexually free, as he calls it. I think that most men do want to get married. The problem is that the laws are broken and the danger is too high. And I mean, I don't have the Matt Walsh video here, but Matt Walsh said that, well, you know what? It's risky, but you should just take the risk. And it's like, bro, that's stupid. That's monumentally stupid. Why would you say, yes, it's all rigged and there's a chance that you're going to get a divorce? And it doesn't matter if you are, like one of the things that I have a clip here from Ben Shapiro where he says, if you're like, religious, or if your wife prays, you're going to do better. That's not necessarily true. I think that the divorce rates are still like, 20%. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. Even with, Christian couples, religious couples, it depends on the denomination. I don't know what it is in, say, Islamic cultures, that how easy it is to get a divorce. Probably not. But maybe they have a point. I'm just saying, maybe they have a point. Maybe Islam is right about women. But when it comes to like Christian denominations, they all kind of swim, especially in the Protestant denominations, they kind of swim around the 20-something%. The only one that's actually really low is Orthodox, which is less than 1% of Orthodox Christians get a divorce. But like, the other ones is so it's not that. The problem is simply that we aren't asking enough of women. We're not even saying, like, we don't have any standards, none are allowed. And Klavan himself, he's claimed to be an anti-feminist, like from the beginning, and I've watched a lot of his content, and he's always reminding us that he's an anti-feminist, but he's not. He's really not. I don't even know what it is he's against. Like he's definitely like here's how he frames it. He's like, I'm anti-feminist, but I'm not anti-woman, or I'm not a misogynist. And it's like, why are you even making that distinction? Like, if you're anti-feminist or you're not feminist or whatever, then just be not feminist. But you can't. That doesn't mean that women are not to be held to any standard, because whenever, like, he went through a video from the Whatever podcast. It was like a compilation of women on the Whatever podcast, basically just being women on there, because if you've seen the Whatever podcast, like that's kind of like the normal woman that's on there is a 304 that's talking about their body count, and they're acting like men, and they're talking about how much money they're gonna make and how they don't want to have kids and they don't want to get married and they don't want to settle down. And of course, Andrew Klavan is like, oh, these poor girls, they've been brainwashed, like something's happened to them. It's like, no, this is what they're choosing to do. They're choosing to do this because this is what we as a society, this is what our culture incentivizes. When you tell women this is what they want to do, and you bombard them with this propaganda and you raise them this way, it only works because it feeds into an urge they already have. So the temptation to do these things is already there. You just need the right person to spark it, and then so they act on that. And if you just keep saying, well, men should do something about this, it's like we're never gonna get anywhere. So I like Klavan on a lot of stuff, other stuff that he's talked about, but not this. He does not know. Like he can't hold women accountable. All he can do is hold them in, at best, he's pitiable. Like, oh, it's too bad. Like, oh, that's a shame they're like that. It's like, No, this is what they're like. Like if you went to them and said, "Did you know you've been brainwashed by feminism?" They would be like, "What are you talking about?" and then call them a bunch of names. I mean, probably incel would be one of them. But yeah, it's ignorant. Go ahead.
Sorry, Brian. I just wanted to add to what you just said here just now, and there are a few things I noticed whilst Mr. Clavin was speaking on this particular issue from the video we've been watching. First of all, his framing of the issue essentially as how do I put it? As the grievances of men being, in effect, a long storied series of cultural complaints that are just a fixture of the society, and that, in effect, people like Pearl and the rest are blowing them up, so to speak. You understand, like exaggerating those complaints.
No, but the thing is, Clavin thinks she's being hyperbolic, but she's not. She's right. Like, I think she is right about all the stuff that she says that he thinks is absolutely insane. And it's like, no, she's right. You're blind. Like, you can't see what's going on with the Zoomers and the Generation Alphas right now. This is all true. Like, this is happening. The men know. Why have Zoomer men and Generation Alpha men moved, like, politically in the opposite direction from where the women are going? Because they don't want to deal with that shit, and they're aware, like, because of the internet, because of people like Pearl and us.
Well, I also wanted to add to my earlier statement that it's not necessarily that how do I put it, that and I'm not disagreeing with you that that Pearl isn't correct. She is correct in a lot of what she says, frankly, and frankly I would argue even more correct than she knows.
Yeah.
The problem is that the conclusion is too frightening for everybody to bear, but it is there, and it will remain like essentially like an ominous presence in our society until we finally admit to the fact that it is there, and it is a very frightening proposition. What I was going to say earlier on is that Clavin's position, in effect, is that how do I put it? That men are of little to no intrinsic value until they provide the necessary culturally demanded services, roles, and until they perform the culturally accepted duties that a man ought to perform to a woman, or in a woman's stead, or in a woman's interest at least, for him to be considered a man. In other words, a man has to do a certain set of things to be worthwhile. And the only reason a lot of these men are in the same situation, in the situation that they are, and you've heard this with Jordan Peterson as well, is that they've not made the correct sacrifices. Now, I'd like them to go say that to people like what's his name, Earl Silverman. I'd like them to go say that to essentially the thousands of veterans who came back from the global war on terror, who were essentially thrown out of their houses by their wives, left destitute on the street. I'd like them to go say that to the thousands of children who now live in child poverty. You know, those 5-year-olds who've refused to go don their reflector vests, their hard hats, and their ballistics gloves to provide the necessary provisions for their mothers, oddly enough, who, as usual, would need some fake nails and some new Louis Vuitton bags. The statements that Mr. Clavin is making, it's not necessarily that they are disingenuous per se.
No,
is that I think they come from a place of fright. Because I've heard an older gentleman say this to me when I got expelled from my university here in Canada, when he said to me, "Are you going to go fight City Hall?" It's like the older conservative men It's not that they don't see it, but they're terrified of what they see. And they are right to be terrified because, in effect, what the women of our society have done is that they've stabbed our society in the back. Like they've used the social power that they have, the influence that they have, the social clout that their role in society, the regard that society holds them in. They've used it essentially as a weapon against society. And the only thing that is left, in effect, for men to do, usually to set this kind of thing right, is to go into the discussion with the probability that they're going to have to, at some point, bang heads. Because some people are, it happens to be the case that sometimes when you're dealing with radicals, they can be implacable. And if you have a radical person, like, say, someone like Sophie Lewis, a British feminist and a geographer, essentially, who writes an article in I believe it was The Spectator or National Review or someplace, essentially calling for the abolition of the nuclear family. It's like, well, if you abolish the nuclear family, who loses out? Well, it's children that lose out. And I just also wanted to end by pointing out that Mr. Clavin's claim, in effect, that the church created marriage to benefit women is a lie. Okay, it is a lie. And I'll stress this here because I'm a child of the church. I'm not Catholic, but I was born in the church. I have great respect for the institution that the church is. The purpose of marriage was to hold men responsible for the children that they sired. But it was because of the children. Okay? The first medieval castles in Europe were built to protect kids from Ottoman slave raids.
Yeah,
you get me?
Yes, absolutely. He's putting the women above the children in this case.
Yes, the moral center of our society ought to be, if we're going to say, well, God is dead and we've killed him, so to speak, then normally the closest thing, I think, to the nature of God in a society is the innocence of children. And the West has essentially cannibalized that innocence. It has mocked that innocence. It has ridiculed that innocence. And to the point where, like a Twitch thought, so to speak, an OnlyFans digital prostitute gets more respect than a newborn baby. So yeah, I just wanted to add that that it's not that Mr. Clavin's looking through the wrong looking glass here. It's that his looking glass is broken, and he's terrified of admitting that it is broken because he's terrified of what he might actually see.
Yeah.
When he puts on the right looking glass.
Yep.
Because I don't think the women of our society can even, like, how do I put this? So I'm sure you're familiar with the phenomenon of passport bros, correct?
Oh yeah, I did a show on it like the month before last. We talked about that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, so one of the ways to gauge, how do I put it, the worth of a person in society, right? I mean, it's not the only way. Sometimes it's not the best metric, but it tends to help in a sense. It's the same way you ascertain what is true in a society. The first is through sense data. So the things that you can smell, the things that you can feel, the things that you can taste and touch, so to speak, and hear. The second is through public consensus. So what other people say about you. If you understand what I mean, like people in a way are a mirror through which our lives play out, through which we see our lives play out. And sometimes their criticism can be destructive, and in those cases you don't listen to them because then you're dealing with someone who themselves have, in effect, they don't have the ability to exercise empathy, so their mirror is broken. But there are people who are constructive in their criticism, whose criticism is worthwhile, in effect. And when you hear some of these women from places like the Philippines, like Hong Kong, like Singapore, when you hear them talk about Western women and sort of, when you see the attitude of Western women sort of reflected in their eyes, when they tell you exactly what they're seeing, Like, I don't think the ladies of our society recognize how monstrous they've become.
No, of course not, because they're encouraged to do that. But I
So
should.
I'm just going to stop at that.
Okay,
essentially.
I'll move on. I did get some super chows. I don't have a Badger Chan for this, but I'll just read them out. So, Richard Beer, thank you. You are the GOAT.
That's what I'm talking about. That's why he's the MVP. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT.
And he gives us a $10 and a $5 super chow and says, did you hear about the job fair in Florida that was supposed to be for women only, that was crashed by men deciding to identify as non-binary, but had he, him pronouns in their name tags? Yes, I did. Very funny. I might cover that on Tuesday. Then he gives us $5 and says, there were all kinds of meltdowns and crying that these non-binary men weren't attending any of the panels and just going straight to the company recruiters with their resumes. There were some reports that the men were actually pushing others out of their way to get to the front of the line. One commentator mentioned that perhaps all the men who were at this job fair should be disqualified from employment at all the companies that were recruiting there, if not across the entire industry. Well, that's what you get. You created the conditions for this, ladies. You created the conditions for this. And now you actually have to deal with the shit that you've built. Okay, so I'll listen to Pearl's reaction. So this was like one of the early videos when she started fighting with the Daily Wire. I think Matt Walsh might have made the first one, and I don't have that one in front of me. It doesn't really matter. But I think that they have been fighting back with her on Twitter, and it's getting to the point where she is getting through to them. And I think this is really, really good. Like, it's going to make them mad. They're going to say stuff that's infuriating, but they have to concede. They're conceding ground all over the place, okay? But let's hear
Church,
a
where it's
little bit
good for
more.
society, you're telling them absolutely nothing.
So I want to talk about a couple things. So first of all, he calls me a provocateur because I say women are dumb. No, I mean that. I really do. By and large, guys, if you had to pick 10 women to solve a problem or 10 men to solve a problem, the problem with us women is we just start like crying about the problem. We don't go to solve it. The men actually try to solve the problem. So yeah, no, I'm serious. I am dead. You can call that provocative, but I really think this is just basic truths, okay? Do I think every woman is stupid? Of course not. But by and large, when you look at the decisions we make, they're by and large stupid. So, I mean, you might not like how that makes you feel, but I think by and large, if all the women went home tomorrow, the workforce would be more productive. They could fire all the HR departments, all the paperwork would go away. I really, yeah. And
Well, HR departments should go away. They're the worst. They're some of the worst things that ever happened to a workplace. But I will piggyback on that by simply saying that I think that what Pearl is doing is not just, and I'm not saying she's a genius because I'm sure she wouldn't say that, but I'm not saying that. But I think that when you say provocative things that would not have been considered provocative 30 years ago for someone to have an opinion on, you're kind of telling people that the Overton window has changed and people are not allowed to push against it, where even supposed conservatives come after Pearl. And I put that in quotes because I've said this many times. What people call conservatives now are just the feminists from the 60s. So, I mean, is that conservative? Yeah, I suppose. But that's by feminist standards. So, yeah, you were like, oh, yeah, like Pearl, this is another thing that Pearl does, is she says she sells shirts that say women shouldn't vote. Why is she doing that? Well, part of it is because she really believes it, but she also knows that it's not likely that's ever going to change, because the only way women are going to stop voting is if they vote against it, if they vote in favor of not voting. But she's making a point, and the point is that she's also saying something that is completely abhorrent to say today, but probably wouldn't have been so terrible in the 1960s. So, or it would have been just kind of edgy back then or something, right? So it's not just about like putting your ideas out there and challenging the established like I don't know, narratives about our existence, about our current culture. It's also about saying, well, remember when we used to say this, and then you kind of put it out there and people freak out and you're like, well, like in the 80s we could have said that, or in the 60s we could have said that, and it wouldn't have killed anyone. So there is another, and then there's also the fact that there's a little bit of truth to it. I jokingly say repeal the 19th. I think that's the one that gave women the vote. But I have a point though too. I got into a debate with some folks in the XY crew where they were like, well, why would you say that? Like, why would don't you think that would hurt your cause? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, but I think there's some real things that have to be like hashed out that no one wants to hash out because they don't want to upset women. At the end of the day, that's all this stuff comes down to is, I don't want to say this because it might upset women. Who fucking cares? I'm sorry, but who cares? Like, I mean, my wife says things that would upset women, and she's a woman. So it's like, why are we like completely unable to talk about stuff? It reminds me of, again, Lawrence Fox. He basically says that that woman, Ava Evans or something, Ava is not attractive because she's a fourth wave feminist. What man would want to sleep with her? And GB News, they're fucking supposedly the conservative outlet. Again, I'm making a point. None of these people are actually conservative. Like, they're not. They're just the liberals from 30 years ago, and oh, well, we got to fire him. We can't, because he upset women. But even though he was only criticizing a woman, no, that's all women when you say that. And even MRAs came after me over it. Brian, that's just not constructive at all. It's stupid. You shouldn't do. Lawrence Fox is hurting us. I'm like, Lawrence Fox is not an MRA. He's just a guy with opinions. Like, I'm sorry, but like, it's not dumb to say what you mean and mean what you say. It's how other people decide to take it. That's their problem, So I'm okay with Pearl making these generalizations, but more than that, because that's nothing. That's small potatoes. More than that is that the when she talks about the problems with marriage, divorce courts, child custody, alimony, and all the rest of it, child support, etc. She's right. Now, these are not her ideas. I know that you guys say she's got her talking points from people like us and others, but that doesn't matter. I was never in this game to like be the guy that said the thing. I only wanted other people to hear our message and reach more people. And hopefully someone of some means will get the message out there. Like, going back to like whether or not you should operate within the feminist frame, because the truth is our entire dialogue is constructed in a feminist framework. No matter where you are politically, no matter what your beliefs, everyone is operating within the feminist frame because they built the frame and they've raised generations of kids in that frame, and now we're all in that frame. Even if you rebel against it, you're like people like Clavin, so I'm an anti-feminist. No, you're not. You're a second wave feminist at best. Like at best, right? And that's because you're still operating within the frame. So they're the ones that set up the chessboard. They're the ones that decided like who gets to use what pieces. This is why you can't win if you play by their rules. You have to become a pigeon and just kick over the pieces and just say what you think. This is what they don't like, and to David's credit, it terrifies them. It terrifies conservatives to potentially be faced with the fact that their entire life was a lie. It's a terrifying thing. And some people are waking up to this. And I've mentioned this before, and this is one of the first videos I'm going to do. I'm going to cover Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder's life, his romantic life and his professional life has changed so much, and his content has as a result. And I think he is becoming red pill faster than the speed of color. Like, I mean, nothing like Clavin and Ben Shapiro. They're totally establishment, pro-marriage, pro-cuck bullshit. They don't know what's going on. And they might get divorced. Like, in the next 10 years, 15 years, it could happen. And then they'll be like, what the fuck, right? So let's hear a little bit more Pearl. David, please, guys, call in, because I'm not going longer than 6:30. My wife and I are going to do more Resident Evil over on Honey Badger Arcade tonight. So when we're done here, join us over at Honey Badger Arcade. We're going to be doing more Resident Evil 5. We had a blast last night. Thanks for everyone who showed up. I know it wasn't a lot of people, but it was a good time. Really appreciate it. That's after this show. Okay, so anyway, I got, did anybody else send a super chow? Because I'm kind of flipping back and forth here. No, not yet. David, do you have any thoughts on what I said before I play more of this video?
Yes, I do. And I just, I wanted to say, of course, that as usual, you're spot on, and you've made very, very important points that I think everybody ought to take fervently. Look, when I talk about men's issues, I talk about it with the implication that things are going to get really bad, right? So my greatest fear from all of this, and it is a fear that I sort of wake up with every day, is that the gender divide in our society is manifesting itself as a political divide. Okay? And in anything having to do with politics, so to speak, I think it was Ayn Rand who said that politics is man's relation to each other on the basis of morality. And she also said that morality ends where force begins. Modern, or at least politics in terms of government, so to speak, relies on the exercise of force. Okay, politics is not about like, schoolhouse rock civics. At the end of the day, politics is about force, it's about power, and it's about control. That's the truth. That's just what it is.
Well, it's the state.
And so, we're getting very, very quickly to a point in our society where the problems of our society are looking like the kind of problems that can only be resolved by force. And that's one of the things that conservatives are terrified of. Because, look, the conservatives, generally speaking, throughout history, they've tended to shy away from revolt. They're not the kind of people who revolt on a whim. They're not brigands. They're not, leftists. They're not just salivating, chomping at the bit.
They're hobbits. They're shire folk.
Well, essentially, and they're fairly conscientious, which means, in effect, that they understand what it takes to build a society, and they don't want to see it that way. They don't want to see a society burn, and they certainly don't want to see a society burn as a result of its men essentially taking up, in effect, a martial position against the government and their acolytes, so to speak. By acolytes, I mean the various interest groups that the government has taken under its wing, in effect, its social enforcement arm. And they don't want to see that. So there's a lot of risk here. Because if eventually we intend to do the right thing, I have no doubt that, look, Brian, I've spoken to a lot of these feminists. Like person to person, mano a mano in conversation. And I've discussed with them the fundamental problem at the heart of all of this, which is the risk that they run with their actions, the desolation that it will bring to society. Brian, these people are hardcore ideologues.
Yes, they
These
are.
are Stalinists. They're not going to acquiesce to reason. And so the question becomes, well, what do the fathers of a society do when their women have become, in effect, the political foot soldiers of an ideology that wants them dead? Like, I took the time to analyze sort of like the feminist framework, like very similar to what Tilde brought on one of your shows, which is the extrapolation of feminism from Gnosticism, essentially, from Gnostic ideas. If you follow the dialectical materialist approach to feminism, then in effect, a feminist man would not be a docile man or an obedient man or a compliant man. A feminist man would be a dead man. You understand? So, like, and again, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to convince people to take up arms against the society. I'm saying this because the stakes at play here are such that I really do believe that if men want not just their freedom but their survival going forward, there is a slim possibility. It's not something that can't be avoided, of course, but there is a slim possibility that they're going to have to fight for them. And this is the issue at the tip of everyone's tongue, because this war, this gender war that women are waging, is destroying society. It's smashing up society.
Yeah.
Even if like, how do I put it? It's like a free fire zone. Nobody is immune from attack. Even children get attacked. And what else is more precious to a society than its own children? What else?
Yeah. No, I understand. But I gotta. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's the sort of like the nexus of what I wanted to add is that the the conservatives are not just terrified because they've lived a lie. They're terrified just because of the social implications of what has happened. They don't want to see it.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, the left being the left, in this case, and I will use the word communists here, like they're pushing the window really to the extreme. They're pushing forward. And everything the conservatives don't want is happening before their eyes.
Yeah, but
So,
it starts happening in
that.
places that they don't think are just deserving of observing, which is where we are. Where we're kind of the vanguard or the tip of the spear in terms of like what's being affected first. But they're not going to escape, and I think that there's going to have to be suffering before the majority of people wake up. However, again, I'm just going to add that what Pearl here is doing, I think, is great because it's sort of like part of a larger organic push to get these ideas out here. Why I also mentioned Steven Crowder, who's also been a lot more vocally opposing feminism and pointing out where we're headed as a result of this. And I've talked about the demographic collapse that is coming because there not enough men and women are forming families. And so all the things that these communists want are the resource, the most valuable resource on Earth, which is men's, is men basically. That's going to expire, and you can't get blood from a stone, and that's kind of where it's going. So I don't know, but it all comes down to what is going to be the response from the silent majority, and do those in power have the ability to stop them? If there is a silent majority that is on our side of things, and I have a little bit of hope about that because of my personal in real life experiences with people who know what I do and believe in what I'm doing. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a mystery. It's all I can say. I don't know, but it is an interesting times. I have two things I have to do. One, I got a Rumble rant from NovaFan21. Thank you, NovaFan21. Gives us $2. Thank you so much. And says, what gets me about these tradcons is they never seem to think that maybe the problem is women aren't taught to be held accountable. I swear they are enablers for man-hating feminists. Yes, they don't. I don't know. They just can't do it. It's like they got it. This is why I'm saying they're feminists. They're just like feminists of maybe of an older wave. Maybe they don't like the intersectionality. Maybe they don't like the trans women in women's bathrooms thing. Maybe that's their hang up. But like, it's like it doesn't matter if you believe in patriarchy theory, if you believe that women are victims of something, of everything. It doesn't matter if you think they're victims of feminism or victims of patriarchy, because that's kind of what it's coming down to. You're not treating them like adults. And if we're not going to treat women like adults, then maybe they shouldn't get the benefits of being an adult. I'm just saying. But anyway, thank you for that. And then Mr. Blur has joined us, wants a question. He has something he wants to say. Swash says, thank you, Swash. He's our inquisitor. He makes sure that there's no heretics that get into the chat. He says, Mr. Blur wants to know what the ultimate goal is for the MRM and would like to touch on the demographic collapse of the West. All right, so I'm going to bring Mr. Blur in here. So come on in, Mr. Blur. And hello, sir. Welcome to the call. What's your take? Yeah, there you are. Go ahead.
So, no, last time we did this, kind of had to cut it short a bit.
Oh yeah. You were asking me. Look, I'm not the king of the manosphere. You got to ask Anthony Johnson or Rollo about that. I don't have the authority.
Yes.
You have to ask the CEO of the XY chromosome to comment. I'm just a lowly serf here. I'm just a squire in this kingdom. But what were you gonna say?
Yeah, yes, our Lord and Savior rolled up tomato.
Yeah, Rollo Tomato or the 21 convention or Anthony Dream Beach Muscles Johnson, the king of the manosphere, and Rollo, who invented everything that we talk about. Literally, like as I'm talking right now, he's inventing it. I don't look. The question is, what is the ultimate goal? I don't know what the goal for the MRM is. I can't speak for anybody else but myself. My goal is to try to get the word out to whoever I can that will further spread it out. And this is why I support Pearl. It won't be her that's going to ultimately. She's like the one that is blowing the trumpets, I guess. And people are listening. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that she is a woman. And she knows that. But this is exactly what happened when I found this movement 10 years ago, because I found Karen's videos, and then I found Allison's videos, and then I found Hannah's videos. And I was like, I can't believe there are women talking about this stuff, and I didn't even know this stuff. So maybe it's like this is the role that Pearl is to play, and not Roma, because that's why I brought up both of those people, because they're both big channels. But unless Roma steps up and doesn't do this like weird cloister Patreon thing that she's doing over there, I think she's like promoting an album or something. If she's not doing what Pearl's doing something that I think is truly, I know that like Stunning and Brave gets thrown around a lot, but I think it is kind of courageous to come forward and say this crazy shit. And some of the stuff that she's done, the conversations that she's entertained, the fact that she has had very hostile women on her podcast, like very hostile women that wanted to fight her, women that stalked her, women that she had to call security on. These are just regular women that she had on her show, okay? But then also she's going after the Daily Wire, and I have some theories about why the Daily Wire has suddenly gotten on the get married train, and they're like trying to dissuade the black pill doomers about marriage. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, you're just black pilled and all this. And Lauren Southern has been doing that, and she's like, oh, this doomerism, and the whatever podcast is all fake, and like all the women are actors and it's all fake. No. This is what women are like right now. And so this is the truth. This is what they're like. You know how I know? Because the Barbie movie, when the people, the Barbie was great, it's so conservative, it's so anti-woke, it's this, it's that. No, I don't give a fuck about any of that. If you look at what most women, and I'm talking like 99% of women that saw that movie, they walked away with the exact feminist messaging that Greta Gerwig had in mind. That tells you what women are thinking about. That's what I mean. It's not about the movie. It's about what women are taking away from that stuff. Why are Swifties so fucking crazy? Why do they worship an absolute train wreck of a pop star as Taylor Swift? Because it's them. Because they're narcissists. Why are so many women on SSRIs? Why are those SSRIs doing so much harm to their state of being? Why is all of that happening? It's because that's what they are. Like, shoe on head, she means well, but she's ignorant. Like, you don't know the extent of this damage, right? So I think that what Pearl is doing is necessary. The Daily Wire guys are not able to ignore her anymore. They're responding now, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But so my goal is to make sure that as much people learn about this as possible, while at the same time I can try to provide people with some kind of refuge, so that, because like we may be too embedded in this right now. We're gonna keep trying. I mean, we lost a great man in Mark Angelucci, who's doing a lot of great work, but hopefully some other people, like some of the lawyers and paralegals I've had on my show, they're going to be doing stuff, maybe working with groups like NCFM. I mean, that's all we can do. We're trying to undo what? 200 years of feminist conditioning? Like going all the way back to Mary Wollstonecraft, maybe even before that. I mean, Rome probably fell because of some form of feminism, right? So we're trying to deprogram something that's been like we're going for a long time, like multiple generations. Most of us were born into this system. I've only been doing this for 10 years. It's a drop in the bucket, to be honest. So that's all I can do. That's my goal, Mr. Blur. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I get it. You can only, at the end of the day, you can only really speak for yourself. And in the Barbie movie,
Yeah.
the description of that is Black Panther for white bitches. But I bring it up again because I saw an interesting video earlier today. It's about why the demographic collapse of the West would be a disaster.
Yeah.
Because when you actually examine, birth rates and marriage rates have been falling constantly for a while now, and they're like a 40-year low, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the things that the guy was explaining is that not only do you have the problem of there not being enough workers into the future that are like young and energetic and take risks and try to innovate, you also have the problem of like voter traps. Whereas like if the older generations are larger than the younger generations, they're going to keep voting in their own self-interests, and that's going to come at the expense of a younger generation that literally can't support them. So all that extra tax money that you would see that would go into like pumping up the economy or coming up with new inventions to improve quality of life. Instead, that's going to go into maintenance for the elderly, and then that's just a losing prospect altogether, because that's a downward spiral that only ends with one generation eventually having to foot the bill with a marked decrease in and a standard of living.
Yeah.
And no generation is going to willingly lower their standard of living. So which means is going to be so when that standard drop comes, it's going to be involuntary, and a lot of people are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay. So you said your goal is just to inform as many people as possible.
Yeah, exactly. What's your goal? Yeah.
Yeah, but my thing is like, okay, what I'm waiting. I'm trying to think. What are we waiting for? Some you said like a lot of people aren't going to wake up until enough suffering's been felt. But it's like, what form will that suffering take? Because there's suffer has quite a few different definitions depending on the context, and it's like I don't want to wait for some extinction level event where we literally can't do anything.
I think the fall is going to be slow, and it probably is. We're not going to see like a tremendous impact in my lifetime unless we go to nuclear war, in which case maybe we won't feel it. But like aside from if it's just like the consequences of a demographic collapse, I think is going to be probably not felt by me, and I won't be able. I mean, unless like something miraculous happens, I'm probably not going to have children. Although I'm working on it. I don't know why, but I am working on it. So yeah, this is another thing. Like, this is why the commies they just like flatly have to be stopped. Like they flatly have to be stopped, even if it's for their own good. Because like what they want, like you can't have a socialist government and no people to fund it. So they're dividing families, and they want a socialist government at the same time. It's insane. But this is what they want. And I say that like when I use the word, I throw the word commie around, but it's apt. It's basically anyone who thinks the state should take care of people, and that's most people, and especially most women. because they're ignorant. They don't know what it takes to get what we have. They don't know that it's literally being run in the background and maintained and operated and paid into by men. Because what women will do is they'll become girl bosses until they're like in their 30s, and then they'll be like, I'm gonna retire and marry a guy. And of course they want to marry up, which is really hard to find because women are getting paid better, and their standards are really high, and they can't find a man that meets those standards, and so they end up getting old, and they don't have kids, and then they're 80 years old on SSRIs, surrounded by nurses that don't know them because they're just another number, and they're gonna die by themselves. And I'm asking, is that really what you want? And not just as ladies, but as men. So I mean, I don't, you know, like I don't want that to be my existence. So we have to try to get people to know, like, this is serious. You know, I know a lot of conservatives, they're like, well, I got my shit figured out. No, you don't. What about your kids and your kids' kids? What are they going to do? How are they going to find, you know, like someone? How are they going to be able to sustain when you have like the dregs of society trying to take all of their shit from them, you know, because they didn't do anything for themselves, because they didn't form families? How is any single woman that doesn't have children invested in the future? Why do they vote only for shit that they want? Because they don't live for anyone else. So because there is nobody else. That's why I think this is an unsustainable model for living. We have to have families. It's the only way. And there's only one way to make families. you know, men and women have got to get together and get married. Now, I don't think the state should be involved, but that's a separate conversation. But they got to form families. That's what we got to have. And of course, you know, commies are against the family, because the reason why is because they know if there are families, then there will be fathers. And if there are fathers, then there will be fewer commies, because fathers don't put up with that shit if they're decent fathers. So it's like we either get our way or we lose everything, and I think they would rather just lose everything.
Yeah, and the thing is, the thing with for problems like demographic collapse and that he got in the government's not necessarily a separate conversation. It's that the problems that, well, the problems with demographic collapse can't be fixed quickly, because like people have to have kids, and kids have to grow up.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like not any of the problems that we're seeing now, like the problems are going to come at us faster than we'll be able to solve them.
Right.
So it might be at a point where there won't be an easy solution, but you also can't just haphazardly just start having kids either, because you have women's choices, which, as we have gone over extensively on this channel for a decade now, that women don't exactly have the most incentive to make the best choices at the moment.
Yes, and again, if people like Clavin and the other guys at the Daily Wire don't start calling that out, it's not going to stop happening. And when men make a rational choice, it's completely rational to say, I don't want anything to do with this shit, or I'm just going to get mine, you know, like these guys, like these Andrew Tate or Fresh and Fit types that are like, well, you know, I'm not going to find one to keep, but I'll fuck them all, right? I mean, I get it. Like, I know why they're doing it. I wouldn't do it, but I know why they're doing it. I can't blame them. If women don't want that, they should make better choices. So, but again, they're not being held to any standard. They're not being held to any standard at all. Okay, David, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Brian. I just wanted to add something to that population decline, essentially that population decline angle, so to speak, of the discussion. I think I've forgotten where the study came out recently that the rate of decline in marriage, so to speak, had reached up to 50%. So 50% of people essentially are not getting married anymore. And that is a 10% increase in less than half a decade. So when I look at that number, there are two things that immediately come to mind. And I was taught this in just, like basic statistics in high school, that you have arithmetic essentially increases and you have geometric progression, right? What we are watching is not an arithmetic increase. And by that, I mean, it's not going, 1%, 2%, 3% every year. This increase well, first of all, it's important to understand that there are a lot of things that contributed to holding back this increase. Number one, because it takes time for an idea to go viral on social media. It really does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of time for an idea to go viral in public, so to speak, for people to adopt an idea, and not even that, an idea that it has nothing to do with just momentary pleasure, but an idea on a serious topic like marriage, so to speak. The fact that we've seen this rapid increase in such a short period of time doesn't mean that this is what or as physicists will call it, this is not the stabilization point, or in physics it's literally called retardation, actually. This is not the point of slowdown. This is the beginning of the acceleration, if you understand what I mean. And what that implies is that the next increase, we're looking probably at 30%. So a 30% increase from where we are now will be 80%. And there's every chance that that could happen in a far shorter period of time. Because remember, this idea is spreading. And I think it's one of the reasons why you're finding the legacy media and everybody and their dog in the elite circles of society, even senators and everybody, they're beginning to blow alarms about this. Because, so for example, Alison has said before that young men are the engine of society, and that societies become great when young men are put to viable work, and when they're honored, and when they understand that their efforts have generally a positive effect on their society, so to speak, and it helps them live for something other than themselves, generally speaking. If you're a senator, so to speak, or if you're a member of the elite classes of society, and you see that 60% of young men are single, as compared to 30% of young women that are single. Like, yeah, of course, that will cause a trickle of cold sweat down your spine and down your cheeks, because what that means, of course, is you've created not only a serf class of men, but you've created a revolutionary class of men. And yeah, I think that that is something that I wouldn't really say it's interesting. It will be interesting to watch going forward, but it will be terrifying to watch going forward. And I sincerely hope that everything is done to rectify this, because now's the time for the fathers in our society, and not just the fathers, but everybody and their dog in our society, to start having the conversations that matter. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Yeah, that's right. Mr. Blair, you have any final thoughts?
Let's see, I had something and I lost it. Give me
Oh.
a sec.
I mean, I still think that men forming fraternities has to come back. Paul's doing it. We're doing it here. Go to badgernation.online. It's free. And you have some access. There's a community there. Or go to XY Crew on Subscribestar, $5 a month. It's all Zoom meetings. Paul does at least 2 things a week, so you can see Paul twice a week. Janice does something. She's a man by our standards. she is the man on there, and yeah, there's good stuff. And if you can form your own groups, do it. If you can do them in real life too, if you have like a real place where you can meet up with men, I say do it, because I know that men, they hunger for that. They are, especially after this COVID crap. So anyway, Mr. Blur, go ahead. You didn't give me your final. Do you remember what I was talking about, or what you wanted to say?
I think it was something to this effect. Is that you've got. I say when you've got a large group of young men in any society, then you have to be extremely careful about how you handle him, because right now what we're already seeing this is that you've got a it's a large minority of men who don't even want to interact with women romantically. You have another large minority of men who can't interact with women romantically, and that's because of women's choices. And so it's like, okay, so that could tip in either direction. Either men are either gonna fuck off or they're gonna say fuck you.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But as that being the most powerful engine for society, as Allison has put it, or when I said it's the most powerful resource, it can be pointed in the right direction. We just have to stop shaming them. We have to start holding women accountable, and it could probably change things pretty fast too. By the way, but we just got to get the fuck out of their way and tell them. Men are ready to even now. They're still looking for some way to do some good. I mean, so even now. All right, well, Mr. Blur, I'm going to move you. Thanks for calling in. So I'm going to wrap this up here shortly. I want to listen to a little Ben Shapiro. Do you want to listen, or do you want to go into the screening room?
I mean, I'll listen.
Okay, stay here. I'll play a little bit of this. So this is a different video. Pearl responding to Ben. Let's get a listen. And I want to point out, this one was 2 days ago. The Klavan one was 3 days ago. And I think since then, the conversation is still sort of ongoing. And I think this is important. I think it's important because these people can reach a lot more people than we can. And I don't care how the message gets out there. I don't care how the conversation begins, as long as it does. And this is like, I've been doing this for 10 years. And I mean, not since Cassie J's The Red Pill have we been able to reach this many people. And if it weren't for Cassie J's movie, by the way, then the progress that we have made wouldn't have been made either. I mean, like I said, misandry is part of the general discourse now. People have heard the word. They're using it more and more. It's only, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there is some progress being made. All right, let's listen to this.
Well, folks, there's something called the Red Pill movement. It's sort of a far-right movement that focuses in on saying the unsayable, and now many of the red-pilled have taken the position that it's bad for men to get married. A fascinating debate has broken out about the value of marriage. It's really interesting. So there are a bunch of people on the so-called red-pilled right who have now suggested that marriage is bad for men, that men should not get married. Now, the case that they're making is not the liberal feminist case that basically men are useless and terrible and a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle or anything like that. The case that they are making is that the stakes of marriage have been changed by things like no-fault divorce, custody arrangements, the child support payments and all the rest, spousal support, that basically the legal regimen has made it not a bargain for men to get married. Now, I agree with the critique of all of those policies. I think no-fault divorce is a disaster area. I think that the child custody arrangements that basically always go to mom no matter what, that is a serious problem. When you shift the incentive structure, there's a reason why the majority of divorces, the vast majority of divorces, are now initiated by women. That is not because in the past women were wildly abused and today they are wildly liberated. What that really is when you shift the incentive structure and it turns out that all the risk is now taken by men, women are going to be the ones who actually activate and push that divorce button. However,
real quick though, the incentive structure was not set up in men's favor before either. So this isn't a flip or reversal, okay? This is like what were you gonna say?
It's a bit of a false premise there, Ben.
Yeah, false. I thought this guy was crazy high IQ. Like I'm starting to doubt that, but okay. No, this is not what life was. And I don't care how you think it. When you say, "Oh, now women have all the incentive," it suggests that before men had it, but they didn't. So this is just not true. But anyway,
the red-pilled have taken it one step further, and now they're telling young men you should not get married. It's too dangerous to get married. Don't get married. That's foolish. That's foolish. So let's go through some of these arguments because they become very popular on the right. So let's start with Pearl Davis. So Pearl Davis is an anti-feminist who has become pretty popular these days. A lot of people label her sort of a female Andrew Tate, although without the checkered past. And here is Pearl Davis talking about marriage.
The tradcons, Daily Wire, conservatives are saying that Pearl's just a doom and gloomer who lies about stats, just focuses on the negatives, never the positives, and all the men complaining are just crybabies. And so one day he comes home and he finds out that his wife had called the police on him and told them that the first time they hooked up 10 years ago, he had quote unquote raped her. And the truth of the matter is, when a man has children, they're not his kids. A man has no way to have children and those kids be actually his. They're always hers, because the courts give the women custody 90% of the time, and rich men are really the only ones that have the money to fight it and the time. So I asked the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boeing, Matt Walsh, is this just crybabies? Are they just they're crybaby, weak men who don't man up and want to risk that? So, it's interesting, because instead of demanding that the laws change and demanding women face repercussions for doing this stuff, you guys demand that men need to step up and take part in a system that discriminates against them. You say, oh, find a girl that prays, she won't do it. And I had this thought too, until I found a Muslim girl that did the same thing. I found a Christian girl that did the same thing. I found a Catholic girl. It's happening all over. Whether you want to believe it or not, it is happening. I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your church. This happens everywhere.
Okay, so the argument that she's making against it, all these marital policies, those are correct arguments, and nobody is disregarding the pain of men who have been wrongfully victimized under these circumstances where the incentive structure is completely stacked against them. That is true. However, the benefits of marriage are still unbelievable. It does matter who you marry. To pretend that there is no difference between the person that you marry, that it's happening with Christians and Muslims, and it's all the same, that's statistically untrue. There are things that you can do to mitigate against the risk of divorce, and the person that you marry is the chief mitigation. The truth is that in the Jewish community, we always have a backup plan, in the sense that every marital contract is a prenup. Every marital contract is a prenup, right? A Jewish ketubah is a prenup.
Wait, but why is it a prenup then? I thought that if they loved you and you love them, why would you need a prenup then? Why is that literally baked into Judaism? Isn't that curious? It's like, she might take my money. That sounds like anti-Semitism to me, Ben. To assume that a woman's just after your money, especially a Jewish woman. I'm sorry, Mr. Blur, go ahead.
I don't think you're making the point you're thinking.
No, yeah, right.
It's like, and the saying that the mitigation factor is just choosing the right woman. The same energy as choose the best slave master. You don't crack the whip or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, but you see, okay, so I don't know if you can tell, because I'm reading the body language, okay, a little bit, and what I'm getting from this is that Ben and Klavan, at least, they can't deny what the red pill is saying about women. They can't. And they have to concede it. They have a point. This is true. Matt Walsh conceded it too. He said so. No fault divorce, child custody. And this is what I appreciate. I appreciate this. I know that you guys want to like rage at them, the tradcons, because of whatever, but they can't deny it. The left will just deny it. They'll be like, oh, that's not happening. Or they'll say, you know what, fuck you, right? You're like, you should die alone, incel. Like, absolutely not helpful at all. So they have to concede this point. And Pearl has said on her Twitter that she says it with a lot of sarcasm, like once they realize what's going on and I red pill them, they're gonna go to politicians and they're gonna tell them we have to do something for men, blah blah blah. She knows it's hyperbolic. She knows that the odds are that it's not gonna happen that easily, but she is stating her goal. And I think that there is where some chance of, I don't know, victory is not a word I would like to use, but like some chance of making progress in this environment is possible. Like I have friends I've known for decades and decades. And I know four, just off the top of my head, like 4 guys I grew up with that got married, and 3 of those guys got divorced. And they were terrible divorces. Just like one guy lost the house, and I think like his daughter, another guy lost, they just demolished. And these were women that I didn't think would ever do this, because I knew them too. They were like people I knew and I grew up with, and they just threw them under the bus. One girl I knew, I'm not going to name any names. One girl I knew her before I knew her husband, and I got along with her husband great, and when I learned about the divorce, Which, by the way, he actually happened to be a really big fan of the Red Pill, Cassie J's movie, because I told him about it and he went and watched it. But when the divorce happened, they agreed, like in person, not to lawyer up and to just do everything amicably, like as adults. And she went and lawyered up behind his back. So what I'm saying is that, like, you can set aside all the romantic, like, love shit for a moment and just think, because when the shit hits the fan and when a divorce is on the table, especially when it's a divorce that involves property and children, women will become absolutely cutthroat to get what they want, because they know how to disconnect from the marriage. They know how to, I mean, they seem to know how to do it, and they'll do it. Like, all that shit, that the sentiment, that's gone. Like, when, that's gone. I've never been through a divorce, thank goodness. I hope I never have to. But I have been through some pretty ugly breakups. And those can be pretty painful too. So it's not just for the married guys, but it comes down to, like, the ability to establish relationships. And I think that the thing that I find promising about this is that these Daily Wire guys, I have a theory as to why they're on this marriage thing. I think it has to do with Steven Crowder and the contract problems they had, and like what Candace Owens leaked about Crowder. You know about the Candace Owens leaks, right? Where she like leaked that footage of Crowder arguing with his wife, and they tried to make it look like he was super abusive. And then Pearl came out and looked at it, and she said that she didn't see anything wrong. Like, it was just like a fight between like couples. Like, people have had fights like that before. I feel like there's another layer to this, but I don't want to get into it now. It's one of the things I want to cover in a video at some point in the future. But the point is, though, they can't deny it and they can't ignore it. And I think that that's good, because they're going to have to face it. And Pearl's going to keep doing what she's doing. She's going to have she's already had Karen on, but she's going to have Allison on, and hopefully she'll be on this show. I know that we're tiny, but maybe it'll give us a chance to grow. I don't know. You never know. I'd like to reach more people. But that's always been my goal. So anyway, Mr. Blur, do you have any final thoughts? I'm done with this. I just wanted to point out that Shapiro's really young. He's worth like $50 million. So of course his wife's probably not going to leave him because of the money. But if she does, he'll have the money to pay for lawyers, and he is a lawyer, so he can like fight. But what about the regular guy? This is like Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp probably thought this would never happen to him, and now he was put through the ringer. It doesn't matter how high status you are. It doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter. Like, if women could just, they don't have to have anything. Amber Heard, I never heard of her before the case. I didn't know who that was. So go ahead.
Okay, so last thing is just going back. If you just tab back to Ben real quick.
Oh yeah, sure.
I'm just noting it. You said something about his body language. I'm noting his body language. It strikes me as kind of defensive.
He is defensive. He is, because he doesn't. The thing is with these guys, they don't want to tell men that marriage is a bad deal. They want men to keep trying. So but they know it's a bad deal. And the one thing they're terrified of doing is actually saying, this is women's fault. It is at least in part women's fault. But yeah, if not mostly.
It's necessarily partly women's fault.
Yeah.
Like, it can't be anything else.
But they can't do it. That's why I say Pearl is pretty courageous. Because to hold women accountable is a courageous act. Even if you're especially if you're a man, a man can't even like insult a woman in a joking fashion without getting canceled. See Lawrence Fox. So
yeah, he looking at him is like he looks pretty defensive, and I can kind of understand why, because he doesn't, because he made the choice to get married, and he wants that, and it's understandable to want that choice to be validated, but at the same time, intellectually he knows he can't say don't trust your lying eyes. So it's like So he's kind of put in the awkward position of trying to defend / validate his own position and reconciling that with the reality that women frankly need to make different choices.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna let you go. So you have any final thoughts before I move on? I got an announcement, and I want to say goodbye to David, and then I'm gonna wrap the show up. So any final thoughts?
No, that was the last thing.
All right. Well, thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead, David.
Sorry, I just to sort of wrap up this session. I just wanted to add one very vital thing. And maybe because I'll be 30 soon, frankly, and I feel old. I feel like a fucking geezer with a walking stick sometimes. But I'll say this: the most precious possession a man can have today are his wits and his word, right? So his brain and essentially his brain, of course, and the works of his hands, his skill, essentially. And it is important not to allow other people to make you lie. If you get what I mean. Like not to allow other people to pressure you into lying. The most precious trait a man can have in the current day, and it's counterintuitive because it seems, it seems like, very daredevilish, frankly, and comes with a lot of, it comes with severe risk. But the best thing a man can have is integrity. Okay?
Yeah.
Speak the truth. Don't lie. No matter what, damn the consequences. Damn the consequences to hell. Don't lie. So you look at what Lawrence Fox did, right? He wasn't lying. There's nothing he said that was a lie. He's correct. He's bang on. And he should never apologize. Don't apologize. Just speak the truth. Let them take away the societal accoutrements that they think you can't do without, because they're doing it deliberately to punish you.
Yeah.
The party of compassion, so to speak. But it's all right. Let them punish you. Let the sting of their whip fall on your shoulders. Speak the truth.
Yep. Well, thank you, David. Yes, I agree 100%. Don't stop apologizing for what you say if you know that what you said is what you meant. And don't shame other men for doing the same. All right, well, I'm going to wrap the show up here, so let me move Mr. Blur. Thanks for coming on. I only got one call today, but I'll take it. Have a good one, sir.
Yeah, see you.
All right. And I'm also going to move David out of here, too. So thank you so much, David, for coming on. I'll be in touch with you about, like anything that you, want to say you want to make a video. I can do the readings. My wife says I have a good voice. I don't know if I believe her, but I'll see if the world thinks so. So, thank you, David, and we'll be in touch.
Certainly. I just wanted to add that I have 3 projects, essentially that I'm working ferociously towards. I'm in the 4th chapter of my book, and
that's good.
And I intend to finish it, give or take, at most mid next year. It's just at the moment I'm struggling to get through 2 ginormous courses.
Yeah,
so
sure.
As soon as I'm done with those, I will turn my attention towards that. My intention going forward is to, and I've already laid out the business plans for this, is to build something very similar to a media company, essentially an organization centered around essentially a podcast on YouTube, a website, and the ability to sell merchandise. So at the moment I'm just trying to get my feet wet, and I've spoken to certain people in my life who just said, David, you have the ability to speak, and you have the ability to present words with fair clarity. You need to use that. You need to use that, and you need to make something of that. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do. It's not easy, but yeah, better late than never. So.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm going to move you back into the screening room, and you can hang out there or, do whatever you got to do. But thanks so much for coming on the show. All right. So a little bit of news, and then I'm going to close it out. Tomorrow, normally I would not have a show, but I'm going to be doing a fireside chat because my guest is only available on Saturdays. I'm going to be talking to a MGTOW named Hammer Hand. I found his channel on happenstance. He was responding to a Lotus Eaters video that pissed me off, as well as I think it was some other person he was replying to that were kind of like putting forward like really old hat arguments that we've been dealing with for a while. He is a monk, MGTOW monk. If you guys know of Hammerhand, let me know in the comments. I'm going to be talking to him tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, so be on the lookout for that show. If you guys have anything you want me to ask him about or tell him, leave me a comment on this show and let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all in on tomorrow's show. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the Badger Lodge today, the phone calls. What do you think about Pearl? I'm really warming up to her. I like what she's doing. I know that people have different perspectives on this, but that's just what I think. Also, let me know, like, is this better, or do you prefer the side view thing? I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit more dramatic. And lastly, I will be streaming on Badger Arcade, Honey Badger Arcade, Honey Badger Arcade. You can follow it on my personal Facebook page. I'll stream it there. I will also be streaming it to Twitch and YouTube. So hopefully I'll see you guys then. It was a blast last night with Lindsay, and we want to do it again. So like, share, subscribe, comment, and yeah, if anything, I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one, everybody.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.